Peace, peace. What's happening? So, how many of you have checked out this really good book um, called "The Lost Teachings of Atlantis"? And it's supposed to be by this particular cat by the name of John Peniel. Really good book. Someone wanted me to do a video on this, so that's why I'm talking about this book. This was one of my first books that I read a while back when I when I first got conscious. I mean, we talking like back in 2006, and really interesting book. I mean, written from an interesting perspective, and essentially what the book is about. Just to kind of go into it, and then from there I'll go into, I guess, my views on the book. Where I'm at now because the book is interesting. It addresses the lifestyle of the Atlanteans versus, I guess you could say, the lifestyle that we live now, but it's not clearly addressing it from that perspective. But that's the interpretation that I get from the book. The book is written really eloquently, really well, but it's essentially about this guy that lived, in the modern world. I think it took place. It took place like back in the 50s or 60s, and he was just watching television one day, and he said he was watching television, and some kind of way his television experienced this like glitch. The next thing he knew, this guy came on that looked like he was like some form of a like monk or some form of a priest or something, and got to talking about like, you've been looking for the truth all of your life. You've been lost, and you've been, that there's something else to this world, but you can't quite put your finger on it, and this message is for you. He felt like he was speaking directly to him because he was saying he was supposed to be watching another program. And keep in mind, this took place like back in like the 50s or 60s or whatever. So like conscious stuff wasn't coming on television during that time. So he was wondering like, what is this doing on television or whatever. So the guy was like saying like, that, the world that you live in right now and the information and the religions that are in this modern world aren't really built for your nature, or aren't really, they weren't really for you. Basically, essentially, you don't really fit into this world, and if you feel like this is for you, then you need to come on over here. He gave the address to this particular land or this place, and I forgot the name of it. It was essentially a monastery, though. It's essentially what it is. And he like, if you want to experience real life and get the truth about the world and what's really going on, you need to come over to this monastery or whatever, because there's a lot of stuff that they're keeping from us in this world or whatever. So the guy, one thing led to another, and the guy, I'm not going to spill all the beans in the book and tell you everything, but I have to tell you a little backdrop. So the guy, he ends up going over to this particular place, somewhere over in like the east. I mean, I don't know if it was like India, Tibet, or wherever it was at. And essentially what happens is that he ends up joining up in this monastery, and he goes through all of these experiences, and he's taught all of these amazing teachings. Now, another thing I want to point out is that I think it's interesting, the guy uses, his pen name is John Peniel. I don't believe that was, the guy's original name, which I'm not, I understand you have to have a trade name and things of that nature. I think that was just his pen name that he used, but it's funny that he used the name Peniel or pineal. How I looked at it, like the pineal gland, the pineal gland is what some people call it. And it's funny he chose that as a pen name because when you get to studying a lot of the teachings, what he's teaching is that essentially the teaching, this was the religion and the way of the Atlanteans. This religion and this custom or this monastery set up its organization or its rites based upon the way that the Atlanteans lived. And it's, about, it has a lot of stuff in there. It talks about like, not, like how you really as a spiritual person shouldn't really like really seek money and seek to get rich and things of that nature. But it talks about how, since the world and the way it's set up in the Western world is kind of set up to where you have to essentially, try to get rich. I mean, that's the bottom line or whatever. You have to like seek money because it's based on capitalism. So it addresses a lot of principles. It addresses selfish love, unselfish love, divine love. It addresses all these different forms of love, and it goes into all of these amazing teachings. So I want to kind of get at in this video because the person, wanted me to just give my views and my opinions on it, and I wanted to kind of focus on the economic aspect that they speak of. in the West, and they speak of, how in spirituality and things of this nature, you shouldn't really seek money or seek to get rich. You shouldn't charge for services, essentially, and all of this type of stuff. And I want to kind of like get into that and give my views on that. Now that, is the Atlantean paradigm. It's very true in the Atlantean system. From my research and my studies, no one was responsible, really, essentially, for themselves. Like survival of the fittest, is where I'm getting at. Is survival of the fittest was eliminated in the Atlantean custom and in the Atlantean system. The Atlanteans lived off of basically a system of kind of similar to, I guess you could say, socialism, essentially, where everyone essentially worked for themselves. They were working for themselves, but they were working for the government or whatever the government was at that time. So there was no need really for a person. There was no poverty. There was no homeless people. All of that stuff didn't exist according to the teachings of Atlantis. And this is because of the way that the Atlanteans set up their system. They didn't even really have like a currency the way we have. We had to like go into the store and buy stuff. Everything was essentially free in the Atlantean system. I know you're like, that's hard to believe. How is everything free? Well, it was set up based upon free energy. The Atlanteans found out a way to power their vehicles from an unlimited supply of energy and from free energy. So therefore, they didn't really need to like have money to exchange for energy. And that's really, when you study money, and the reason why we need money is because of the fact that our energy isn't free. If we have free energy, we wouldn't need money. The fact that our energy costs us money causes us to have to make an exchange in order to keep everything powered and keep everything running. There has to be an exchange made. And this goes on for governments have to make an exchange with other governments. Corporations have to make exchanges with other corporations. People have to make exchanges with other people in order to keep everything powered and to keep everything going. So in the Atlantean times, they had, crafts or ships or vessels. They were like vessels that flew in the air, and they ran off of the oxygen of the air. They said that the pyramids were built and designed as a grid to channel some type of energy, so that when the Atlantean UFOs or crafts, they look similar to UFOs, but they were crafts, when they would fly to the region of the Giza complex and different pyramidal complexes, they would take in a certain amount of energy to keep themselves going. Similar to how Nibiru functions. Nibiru functions off of, it can take in energy from multiple sources. It can take in oxygen and convert that into useful energy to travel. It can take in energy from thought, from people aligning together and sending out energy from their thoughts and channeling that energy to keep it going when it travels multidimensionally or through various different time periods, whether it's past, present, or future. It travels off of thought. So depending on how it's traveling will basically be determined as to what type of energy it needs to move. If it's moving through a linear time period, it will use oxygen and things of that nature. But if it's moving through a past, present, future type of time period, it uses thought. And this may sound like crazy to you, but if you study any amount of science, your thoughts send out energy. This is science, really science 101, so it's not like I just sit around and make this stuff up. Your mind sends out energy, is what it does. And if your mind is sending out energy, then that means this energy can be harnessed, converted, and used. It's just that we may not have discovered how to use it, but it's not impossible. Your body creates more electricity. You have more electricity flowing through your body to power a city. Did you know that? That's a scientific fact. In your body, you have enough electricity flowing to power a city. Go look it up. A small city. And you think that we just weak? We are powerful beings. We energy in of ourselves. But back to this whole spiritual paradigm thing. So with the teachers of Atlantis and the way that they had everything set up, they didn't need money because the exchange, they set up and found a way to make the exchange free, but they did have to work. Everybody had a job to do. And if you study that book in The Lost Teachings of Atlantis, he clearly talks about how he wasn't just in a monastery sitting back meditating all day. He had to clean up. He had to basically keep the monastery flowing. He had a job to do. Everybody had a job. There was other people that lived in the monastery with him, and everybody had a job to do or a task to do to keep everything going. But as long as everybody did their task, it was what's called a self-sustaining system set up to where it would just keep flowing. It was like an automated community essentially is what it was, to where no money was really needed. I mean, no currency was needed to keep it going, because I mean, it was built by them. It was off of the grid. Everything they needed to keep going. From food, whatever they needed, they had a farm or whatever they had. So they really clothes. They made their own clothes. Everything. They had their own teaching. So it's like they really didn't have to go to the outside world for nothing. And I guess where I'm getting at is, so you wonder why people like spiritual teachers, like why they like have to charge for services, and it's like, well, how come they aren't living like that? And that's because of the fact that we live in the Western world, and our laws are even against, the very laws in the Western world are against setting up a community like that. Like, you can't even sit on land. You have to pay money just to have land, even if it was land that was given to you. Essentially, you have to pay a tax. And even if you're a sovereign, you still have to make an agreement or a treaty with the government. You have to barter with the government then. So even if you call yourself a sovereign, see, a lot of sovereigns don't know that. They say, well, sovereigns don't pay taxes, X, Y, and Z. That doesn't mean that you don't have treaties, and you have to do exchanges and barter with the particular government that you're up under to occupy that land. You may say, where's our land? Why do we have to pay anything? Well, do you want to go to war with the government that has all these nuclear weapons and millions of FBI agents and tanks and ships that could just basically destroy you overnight? I mean, come on, you can be macho man all day, but what kind of community you gonna have at the end of the day when the government send their feds in and she would take over your land? You know, like they did Nuwapian's land. Yeah, I know all about that. So, and down in Eatonton, Georgia, which my family had land in Eatonton, Georgia too as well. And one thing led to another, and they lost everything, knocked down the pyramids, and now it's just nothing there but a bunch of department stores, and they call it an amusement park. The man spent his life building pyramids, and they destroyed it, because of some charges or whatever, because of the fact that he must have not had the proper treaty with the government and were doing the proper exchanges with the government, so they declared war on him and took over his land and his property and things of that nature. And he had no way to defend himself, but had he had a treaty and honored the treaty by doing certain exchanges, maybe he could have avoided that. So this is why we need, to charge for services and things of that nature as spiritual people, and to produce, products, and and sell them to the people, because a lot of spiritual teachers, they don't realize that back in the day, if you were a spiritual teacher, you automatically had to have a community. That was a part of the initiation. You got these freelance spiritual teachers out here today. It's just like out here. Some of my true spiritual teachers. That's why I don't really like calling myself a spiritual teacher, because true spiritual teacher that's teaching somebody something, you had like a cult or a clan. They had cults. Like, you had the cult of Sekhmet, you had the cult of Anubis, you had cults. You had the cult of Ogun, you had the cult of all of these different deities that you read about. There were clans, and there were more than one of them set up. The cult of Imhotep, so you had schools and things of that nature. And essentially nowadays we don't understand that. So if you have a cult, everybody had, you may think like a cult, that's like when you go out and give your life to the spiritual leader, and what if they like Jim Jones, and then he take you on the island somewhere and kill you? No, a cult just means a culture. Cult comes from the word culture. So you just have a culture or a custom or a certain way that you live, and you can kind of like have it to where you have a copyrighted culture, to where you can start to offer products based upon your culture, or services based upon your culture. And you can set up a self-sustaining community. And say, for instance, your culture, you like to wear clothes that look a certain kind of way. Well, you can start selling clothes on the market that look a certain kind of way. The rappers were close to doing it at one point. Remember when all those rappers had all those different clothing lines? Every rapper had their own shoes. Just like even basketball players. Like, you got KD got his own shoes, King James got his own shoes. You got all these people that's got their own pair of shoes. This is kind of like getting into like a forming a cult in a way, a culture, because you have your own food, clothing, and shelter is the basis of any cult or culture. So real spiritual teachers, they have to have these things. If you don't have these things, you can't really consider yourself a spiritual teacher. You're just a freelance person offering information, selling services. You're more of an artist, maybe. say for instance, if you give records from the Akashic records, or give readings from the Akashic records, and you give readings with the tarot cards, you give, even if you give astrology readings, whatever, you're just a freelance artist. You know, you're not no spiritual teacher or guru that's trying to really lead people and change their life totally. You just offer exchanging for service. And I'm not saying there's nothing wrong with what you're doing. It's cool. But I'm saying there's more to it than that. If you really consider yourself and you want to be like a spiritual leader or guru, that, you know, like a Dalai Lama or something that you know the world acknowledges, and you're trying to change the world on that level. They had cause. They built their own stuff from scratch. They were like a self-sustaining government. The spiritual communities were, and everybody knew them in that area as who they were, and they had peace treaties, and everybody respected them in that area, and they had a duty and a service to the people in that community, just like kind of like the churches in the communities. They have a duty and a service to the communities, and everybody knows them, law enforcement and everything. They have documented treaties on paper, and they have duties and responsibilities in that area or whatever, and the area has duties and responsibilities to them to make sure that their land is protected and that nobody bothers them. So that's what the way Atlantis was set up. And you ask me, will the teachings of Atlantis work, you know, in this day and time? I would have to say no, because we're not. They were operating off of third eye. That's why he called themselves giant pineal or pineal gland. They were a third eye motivated community or uh, government, if you will. The Atlanteans were. We are more so below the heart chakra type of heart and below. I mean, we do have a heart. Most people, you know, they care about people and they help, you know, those in need and stuff like that. But, you know, you have people like that. But at the end of the day, we're not really like a highly spiritual group of people right now. So I don't think those teachers will work. I think that people just being more independent and being more of an artist and exchanging your services, whatever you do, for currency or revenue or whatever the case may be, this is how you should do it, you know, because you are more of an artist, you know. So as far as you being a spiritual leader or whatever the case may be, we're not at that level right now. And then we don't even have a system of free energy set up here in this West, or really, I mean, maybe in some countries they have it, but definitely not here in the West. So we're limited to doing stuff like that. We can't really get into doing stuff like that because we're not advanced enough yet to like really demonstrate the teachings and the law of one. The law of one is a high teaching. It worked in the past, but we're in a paradigm where souls are incarnating as more individuals, and we have a lot of individual karma to work out. You know, a lot of selfish karma to work out. They were more so locked into a group think type of mentality. We are in the land, or we are in the era of the independent. Everybody wants to be independent. Everybody wants to be their own person, which is fine. So we incarnate souls on this planet that want to play that type of paradigm out. So that's why I don't think that the lost teachings of Atlantis is really a good doctrine, you know, for us. I mean, it's a good study. It's a real good read. So I shouldn't say it's a good doctrine for us, but will it work on a universal level? I don't think so. So you guys that haven't checked out the book, you know, I know I ran my mouth about it. Go and get the book, man. It's a really good book. I think you can order it online. I'm sure they have PDFs of it for you guys that are into PDFs. I used to have it. I wish I could show it to you, but fortunately, one of my exes has the book, and hope she's getting a lot out of it, you know. Yeah, when I leave situations, man, like I just leave my exes with everything. Like that's how I do it, man. Like I don't be taking nothing with me, you know. I just keep it moving. But hopefully she's getting a lot out of it at the end of the day. But yeah, man, it's a really good book. Check it out. That's my views on it. Somebody on Twitter wanted me to do another video on this, so any other videos you want me to do, keep sending the requests, and I'll keep them coming. I thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. I'm going to go ahead and shut down this video. I'm going to leave you in on this one. Namaste.